Hi everyone, welcome to ELI, the place where you get your daily dose of inspiration for entrepreneurship. And today we have with us Mr. Bhaskar Majumdar, who is the founder of Unicorn India Ventures, a VC firm that invests in early stage startups that are in pre-Series A, Series A, and Series B stage. Bhaskar is a graduate of IIT Kharagpur and is a board member of multiple Indian startups such as Inc. 42, Smartcoin, and Open Bank. Hi, Bhaskar. Welcome to ELI.
Hi, Priya. Good to talk to you.
I would request you to introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Yes, it's as Priya said. I'm now managing partner and founder of Unicorn India Ventures. We invest in early stage businesses in India. We also have another fund which invests in similar businesses in the UK as well. And prior to this, prior to starting my fund, I have been an entrepreneur myself, twice exited entrepreneur, so I know the pains of entrepreneurship. And recently, I've had the privilege of writing a book, which is done fairly well, which is aimed at entrepreneurs, which the title of the book is Everything Started from Nothing. And it speaks about the whole entrepreneurial journey, the travels and tribulations of that, and obviously the wins and the excitement that comes along with it.
Before we talk about your venture, I'd love to hear about your initial days of career and take us through your life from day one.
I'm basically from Calcutta, went to IIT Kharagpur. Post Kharagpur, I very early on I wanted to join a sunrise industry, so I joined early 90s Times of India, which was a fledgling company at that point in time. I had a great stint with them. From there, I joined, broadcast was just coming off in India at that point in time. I had a long stint with Z, had multiple roles with them. And with them, I was responsible for the international rollout. And that's how I moved to London with them, looking after the international business. But 2001, I decided that I wanted to change track, go back to technology, which is what inherently I am, and then started a business ground up 2001. Very early days of startups in India. Got funding from a large global VC who had just set shop in India. Scaled that business up, sold that business to a large US systems integrator in 2007. Post that, did number of other startups as well, and one more startup I exited, which was in the digital media area, which I exited to a large private equity house. And subsequent to that, in 2014-15, after my second exit, I've been contemplating what to do and started Unicorn, in 2016. So, my journey has been from an executive to an entrepreneur to now as an investor.
Now tell us what are the different ventures that you are actively part of and been driving their growth journey.
So, Priya, from our perspective, we position ourselves as the first institutional investor. So we come in very early in the life of a company. Typically, we come in after the company has been in existence a couple of years, the co-founders have worked together, MVP is out, that's when we sort of invest in the company. From a sector perspective, we stay away from consumer internet. So, we don't invest in consumer internet. We mostly don't invest in any consumer-facing propositions. We strongly believe in this whole digitization that is taking place globally, especially in India, the rampant pace with which it is taking place. And every industry across sectors is being disrupted. And basically, we invest in businesses which are changing business processes using digitization. So whether it be in the supply chain side, whether it be in the logistics side, that is what we do as a business.
And how do you shortlist a business to invest in?
Because we go in early, While of course the team does analysis of the whole sector, does analysis of the competition within the sector, the international scenario within the sector. But for me, because we go in so early, it is basically looking at the entrepreneur in the eye and taking a view on the quality of the entrepreneur. This is something which is very difficult to explain. I keep saying early stage investing is very different from late stage investing. Early stage investing is more an art than a science. And you have to have the art of being able to have a one-on-one discussion, closed room, understand the entrepreneur, understand what drives him, understand his family circumstances, understand what he wants to get into it, because we all know that so early in the life of a company, whatever the broad plan is, the plan will be thrown out of the window and new plans will come out. The plans will be metamorphosed, there'll be new avatars of the plan. So fundamentally it is backing the entrepreneur. I know this is a very oft quoted statement, but that in reality is what it is in early stage, and that's what I believe in. So the final call on investment is me spending time with the entrepreneur one-on-one.
Okay. As the next part of the interview, I have prepared a few question sets that are layman's in nature, and the title, if I may give to this part, is layman entrepreneurs questions. So to start with, I'd love to understand, how does an entrepreneur know that this is the right time to go for funding?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I often hear this, especially from students or first-time entrepreneurs who say, "I have a number of ideas, but whenever I see an idea, I see someone else has done it," and who typically ask, "When is the right time to start a business? Is it when I have an idea? Can I start a business while doing a job?" So the answer to this is, there is no fixed answer, if you ask me. Uh, One is, you have to be all in. You cannot expect to keep moonlighting and then join only when you get a funding. That is not going to happen. So if you believe you have an idea, and it doesn't have to be the world breaking, path breaking new idea, because as I keep saying, ideas are just passe, it is execution that matters. So if you have an idea, if you are passionate about it, if you have built a team around it and you think the idea is good, that's the time you have to go all in and back your idea. Just sitting in the periphery, sitting in the benches and hoping that the idea will roll through never happens, especially in today's world, because technology is fast changing. And, before you even can, finish a sentence, there's somebody else who would have done that faster, better, and cheaper.
The next question that comes to a layman entrepreneur's mind is, how much stake do I give to investor in return of how much investment?
This Priya, is a question which naturally will come to entrepreneurs. But my view, the way I look at it, is there's no point in looking at a stake. It is so early on in the life. You just have to get started. I'm not saying you sell foolish stake, but I see a lot of entrepreneurs who will keep pencil sharpening for 2% here and 3% here. It finally, in the end game, it really doesn't matter. And good investors and professional investors like ourselves, we would never try to take so much of a company so as to demotivate the entrepreneur. So I would think, just flow with the tide, have rational view about where you want the stake. More importantly, rather than taking a call on the stake to decide the investor, take a call on the investor. If it's the right type of investor, if the investor has built similar businesses, if the investor has long staying passion, if the investor can back you with follow on capital, then go with the investor. A couple of percentage points here, there, doesn't matter in the long scheme of life, because true investors will want the entrepreneur to be as incentivized, because at the end of the day, their result depends upon the functionality of the entrepreneur.
Okay. Since you invest heavily on SaaS domain, and SaaS domain is pretty hot after this Freshworks IPO, uh, uh, I have a question around that. When is the right time for a SaaS founder to look for investment? Is it just after minimum viable product, or is it after building a small customer base of around 10 customers, or is it after a little later?
Well, it depends upon how much the investment the founder is looking at. There are often founders who are first-time founders, fresh out of college, who do not have their own savings. So for them, even post MVP to win the initial clients, they would need some sort of investment. And I understand that, and therefore may not be for funds like us, but they have to go to angels to get that type of investment. Uh, but then there are founders who are pretty seasoned, who are second-time founders, or founders who have enough funding capability themselves. For them, I keep saying, don't go in early in a SaaS business to raise money. You go typically after the MVP. Obviously, the MVP is out, and after you've had the initial slew of clients, whether it be 5, 10 is not the matter, but some sort of repeatability of clients have come, and some sort of client roster has been built in. It's more important the client roster, quality of client, and the repeatability. Once that is being built in, then you should look at going for an institutional round. In terms of MRR, it's very difficult to say. It depends upon the type of product you're talking about. But anyway, between $15,000-$20,000 is when I would broadly say, you should start looking at some sort of institutional round. But again, not just the numbers, but also the repeatability and the quality of customers.
Uh, from an investor's point of view, when you invest in startups, some of the startups also fail, and they turn up to becoming bad investments. How do you deal with such situations?
So, I have a strong view in this, that it's entrepreneurs don't fail, it is businesses that fail. True entrepreneurs will reinvent themselves and come back. Businesses fail for a number of reasons. In early stage, it mostly fails because the idea was either premature or the idea was ahead of its time. Over the years, I've seen a lot of ideas that have failed, where I have invested. Those ideas in 2-3 years' time have come back and been very successful. Uh, the other reason why most businesses fail in startup, and this is obvious, but it's worth noting it out, is uh, the entrepreneurs or the companies rather run out of runway. You know that you'll need another 6-8 months. Your metrics are going in the right direction, but you run out of money. And at that point in time, unless you are capable of raising capital, unless you have a sort of background where your existing investors or someone else sort of backs you, uh, companies fail. So we, from our side, although we are a VC, we believe, and the VC business runs on a portfolio strategy that only 3, 4, 5 of them will give the majority returns. We don't like to see failures coming through, and that possibly comes from an entrepreneurial mind that I have been through myself, because I keep telling my team internally that we have a portfolio, but the entrepreneur has only one business. So we have to support the entrepreneur till the end. And yes, but often we do see businesses fail. And when they do, we have to see when it is time to cut the loss and move on. There are sometimes businesses, despite the honest interest of the entrepreneur, will fail because the market has changed, or we see that scalability is not possible. Those are the times when we try to see if there's potential of some sort of a aqua hire, or some sort of a just get the capital back type of scenario. We try to push for those. But then, despite doing everything, the nature of the beast in startups is they will fail, and we have to draw a line and move on. Only thing we tell the founder is, for your reputation in the market, complete the process post failure. You have to ensure all compliances. You have to ensure whatever is due to the investors, if any, comes back to the investors. So just follow the process, because it's a long game out there.
You spoke about runways. In fact, Runway was a buzzword during COVID, when all the businesses went out of, they were not getting any cash flows. So runway becomes a very crucial in such situations. So what as per you is the ideal runway every startup should have to counter any uh,
I think at any point in time, a startup should look at having anywhere between, 9 months to a year's cash. That is my personal view. Uh, I know there are companies who are always at the edge and keep raising money, especially in the B2C business. But in normal SaaS or services businesses, which is more where we back, uh, we always think that you ought to have 9 to 12 months, because even if you're aiming to do a fundraise in today's world, it's not going to be before a 6 month journey. And obviously, uh, but then you cannot also just sit on cash and not scale up the business. So it's the fine row between keeping the cash and keeping and still being scalable and doing the necessary cash burn to be scalable. So that's a fine rope you have to do, but broadly you ought to have enough cash so that if there's a downturn you can survive. And during COVID, I think the Indian startup ecosystem, including all our portfolio companies, came out extremely well. They did all the necessary actions needed to extend the runway. And unfortunate as COVID might have been for the entire country and humanity as such, I think for digital businesses, they did prosper during COVID, because the nature of working, the nature of way the things were panning out enabled digitization to a much greater extent.
okay. The next question is very interesting. It's about conflict between investor and founders. Uh, Many a times, people start up on their own because they don't want any boss on top of them. They want to be their own boss. But uh, when you raise investments, investor may and many a times do become your boss. And when that happens, there might be possibility of conflict between investors and the founders when they have different agendas in their mind. So what is your suggestion to deal with such situations?
Firstly, I don't think investors ever become bosses, or good investors ever become bosses. You know, Never. The businesses belongs to the entrepreneur, and it is the entrepreneurs who determine the success of the investor. And there is a number of annals of history which say that investors who tend to become bosses are not the ideal investors, or even successful investors. But yes, taking money from someone and having investors, especially institutional investors and investors who are sitting on the board with substantial shareholding, you ought to keep them posted about everything that is going on. Uh, that in that context, even if a listed company owner having a majority has boss in the board of directors, so I don't think it's any different from that. But if you're comfortable just being your one man taking decisions, right or wrong yourself, then I don't think you need to do investment. There are a number of cases of people now, especially which who are coming out of the woodwork of even companies reaching near unicorn status, who have been based upon profitability, proficons, who've never had any investors. And one of the reasons they keep saying is, mine was a long haul, I wanted my own direction, but I didn't need any investors. So that's a separate ball game altogether, and there are few people who build fantastic businesses around that. But that aside, I think having investors is not having bosses, but having people who are there to share with you. And earlier you share the negatives of the business with investors, better it is. Positives everyone wants to share first and keep the negatives aside, but earlier you share the negatives, better it is.
What did you do when you find that the founder of a company you invested in is not acting in the best interest of the company, especially when it comes to the funds and how they use it? Let's say they're buying fancy office which is not required and spending money where it is not required.
I think that's where it ties in with your earlier question of having the is the investor a boss? The investor is not the boss. The investor has to be taken into cognizance. And I think all institutional investors in their shareholding agreements do have control over certain activities, and whether it's buying an office or taking or the salary of the founders or getting in very senior people fall within that remit. And therefore, it's important for the investors also to be agile. Often these things happen when the company is doing well. Everyone gets carried away by the excitement, and then suddenly a road bump hits, the company stops doing well, and then everyone starts questioning. So that's a part of a human nature that when things are going well, everyone signs off, and when things stop, you sort of start questioning your past decisions. I think that's where being on the same page, both the investor, especially the investor director, and the entrepreneur, is extremely, extremely important.
A founder's life is always very challenging. But I would like to understand what are the challenges of an investor's life?
It's a good question. As I keep saying, a first time, well, not a first time, investors like us who've created VC firms ground up, and there's a whole lot of them in India now, people who are not part of a platform. For us, it's like no different from a startup. We have co-founders who are fellow GPs. We go to our investors who are the limited partners, raise money from them. We, in a crowded marketplace, want to build a brand and stand out. We are recruiting, hiring people. So we are literally a startup ourselves, and we want to keep the ethos of a startup ourselves. So while on one end, we are signing, and we have the same pain points as a startup entrepreneur, and that's what we say. We are answerable to our investors as much as they are answerable to us. We have to give constant reports. We are questioned on some of our investment decisions sometimes. We have to defer a lot of our decision to our equivalent of the board, which is the investment committee, which often overrules a lot of our decisions, both in investment and in acquisitions. So it's very similar journey. The challenge for us is, again, a very similar challenge. When the market gets heated, as it is possibly now, getting good priced deals becomes difficult, knowing very well that in 7 years when we exit, if the entry price isn't right, the exit price will also be in question. So, these are the same difficulties we face like every other entrepreneur. And honestly, the challenges of business are very similar to that of an entrepreneur.
What are some of the North Star metrics that you track in different ventures that you have invested in?
The first metrics we always keep a lookout for is the runway, especially in early stage businesses where, as I explained, cash is king. So the cash collections, these are the things which we actively look out for. Secondly, what we do is basically we track the growth metrics, whatever be the metrics of the business, whether they are all clocking in the right direction. And third thing which we do, which we keep saying to a lot of our founders, especially in businesses which are B2B to C, is don't go in for the vanity metrics. And we sort of define the vanity metrics. There are a lot of metrics which people get excited about, but those are the loss-making metrics. It's very easy to scale those metrics up just by spending money, but those are the loss-making metrics. I don't want to go into specifics of companies, but there have been at least 2 or 3 of our companies where we were all very excited by the numbers that were clocking up. Then we sat down to see that these are not the real metrics. These were simple metrics which showed great in our PowerPoint presentation. Then we had to redefine the metrics. So it's very, very important to define what the metrics for the businesses are. And again, that differs from company to company, that differs from business you're in, that differs from the amount of funding you've been able to raise, a whole lot of things. So I think defining the metrics itself is also very important. But the commonality of metrics which runs right across is basically the runway and the cash collections, cash burn, the financial metrics, so to say.
Being a founder is a challenging job where you have to stay energetic and consistent throughout the time. But when you become an investor, you do the same, but for multiple ventures simultaneously. Uh, and being early stage uh, investors, you also play the role of mentors for multiple startups. That means you deal with multiple problem statements simultaneously and keep track of multiple things simultaneously. How do you ensure that you remain consistent and energetic throughout your journey as an investor?
Yeah, it's a good question again. There are two parts to the question. One is what I keep saying is the horizontal part, which is common across most of the companies. And that is where early stage investors sort of play a role, which is basically helping them in team building, in broad macro strategies, resolving co-founder conflicts and the usual. Then, of course, you have deep domain knowledge, which I don't think there are investors who can have across the various domains they invest. So over there, you have to call in the mentors who can give them that advice. So that's one part of how you can constantly keep yourself agile across a slew of companies. The horizontal part you can handle, and the vertical part, so to say, you call upon experts who can sort of work alongside you in giving the company's advice. How do you stay agile and how do you stay motivated, fit? It's, I guess, like every other, like the entrepreneurs themselves, same for investors. Heart of it is you have to love your job. If you're just out there thinking, I want to give so much X returns, it's great, that's the end goal, but that's not going to help you go through it. You have to love growing businesses. You have to love talking to your entrepreneurs. You have to be able to get in early stage, like you said, get under the skin of the entrepreneur in a positive way. You have to feel for them, understand. And there are a number of cases where being an entrepreneur really helps, because some of the things the entrepreneurs go through, you can feel and imbibe, and you can ask them, and rather than them telling you, because often, like you said, especially first time entrepreneurs, they do treat investors with very a sense of shouldn't I tell them. So if you have been through the journey yourself, you can go and ask them straight about certain things, because you would have felt the same as an entrepreneur. So yeah.
What would you say is the meaning of entrepreneurship? How do you define the term entrepreneur?
Making something out of nothing. That's been the title of my book, and for me that is entrepreneurship. Today when you see a Google, today when you see an Apple, or in Indian context Flipkart, any of these things, we are all awed and wowed by the size of these companies, the sheer scale of them. But we have to remember that it is an entrepreneur who built all of this out of nothing. And that, in a sense, is what entrepreneurship is all about. All of these start from school dorms, an idea of two people in a college campus, in a garage somewhere, in a flat somewhere. But that's how it starts. Everything, you know.
Uh, Another part to that question, if entrepreneur can create anything from nothing, then where does the role of investor comes?
Yeah, but for an entrepreneur to create something out of nothing, they need capital. So it's not just an idea and passion. You need capital, you know. So the investor brings the capital part of it, and the capital is as important as the passion and the drive. So all of them have to go together in this multi-engined growth of a company to reach its scale. So each of them have a role to play.
uh, Final question to you. Tell us, what are the different lessons that you have learned that we can take away and apply to our ventures, especially in the context of investments and uh, dealing with investors, the relationship between founder and investors?
So there are two things. First thing is, I keep saying this, nowadays, if you open any Economic Times, if you open Forbes, Business World, anywhere you open, all you see is success stories of entrepreneurs. How much a 30-year-old, 35-year-old has made millions, how rosy the picture is. Unfortunately, while this has helped to grow the entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship drive within the country, what this has done also, especially to young folks, is giving a wrong notion of entrepreneurship. And a lot of people I know today enters into this journey taken in by the glamour quotient, if you will. They all think it's a path beridden with roses. It's actually far from it. It's an extremely, extremely difficult journey being an entrepreneur. Even the most successful ones will tell you how tough it is. So my first thing to all people who want to be entrepreneurs is go for it only if your passion is there and you're willing to ride the storm. Don't go for it if you think it's a sexy thing to have in your CV, or you think that my wingmate or my next door guy in IIT has made so much, therefore I have to do it. That's the wrong reason why you're entering. That's one. Second point is never have an escape route. A lot of people I see tell me formally or informally that I'll try 2-3 years in a startup. If it fails, I'll go back to a job. If you have this mindset, you're bound to fail. You have to burn the bridge of return. You cannot have a bridge of, it has to be a one-way path for you to succeed. Third, and equally important for me, is in the initial days is to have support of your family. It may sound very hackneyed, it may sound old-fashioned, but the entrepreneurial journey is so lonely. And especially if you're a young entrepreneur, you will be under a lot of pressure. You will have your batchmate who's in a large enterprise, who's doing well, who has a calling card which has value. On the other hand, nobody knows you, you're struggling. There's pressure from your girlfriend, boyfriends, from your parents, and all of this adds to the extra mental trauma of a startup. These are the finer points which people don't talk about, but these are the end points which determine the success or failure, apart from the business part of it. So I think understanding yourself, where you are as an individual, what you want to get out of life, what your personal circumstances are extremely, extremely important before you embark on the journey. On the relationship with the investor, I think it's like every other relationship. I keep saying this again and again. It's no different from a relationship you may have in life, whether you between your spouse, between your partners. It's very similar. You have to have a fundamental understanding. Both will have different views on certain aspects, but if the fundamental understanding, if the fundamental belief is there that both of you all are out there wanting to do the same thing, it's bound to succeed. And most investors, I'd like to tell the entrepreneurs, okay, unlike what is written about, unlike what is tried to be portrayed, most investors have the best interest of the company and therefore of the entrepreneurs at heart. Conflicts do come, but those are far between, and you shouldn't get into a relationship thinking that there will be a conflict with my investor.
Well, with this, we have come to the end of this session. I must say it was a insightful and a very, very lovely interaction. Thanks for your time, Bhaskar, and our best wishes for Unicorn India Ventures.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Priya.